Here we are with Cycle 3, Week 13 with great artist Grandma Moses. And she is a self-taught artist, also part of the folk art. There's lots of ways to describe this movement or style of art, where it was just basically someone that was self-taught or untrained, and that just creating artwork for the passion and joy of sharing art and making things. So Grandma Moses did paintings, and this is one of hers, the Checkered House. And we can see that, you know, from when we studied perspective in the drawing in the first 6 weeks, the perspective, we can look at some technical things that we see that aren't quite right, but that we see lots of people, and there's a fantastic composition, and but there's also flat areas. There's not a lot of shading or dimension added in the painting here. And here's another example of one of her pieces of artwork. This is sugaring off. So there's a lot happening in this composition. We can see, you know, a little bit of perspective where the people are in the front are larger than the people towards the back here, going towards the horizon line. But things that are not technical about it is, you know, the houses are kind of at different angles, that if we were to draw our perspective lines on there, that they wouldn't quite match up, but that's totally okay. Here are some other examples of folk art in Wisconsin. We have lots of fantastic places to go visit that have folk art. This one is in Grandview Folk Art, which is in Hollandale, actually. And so there's sculpture, and I've seen this one myself in person. It's fantastic. There's lots of sculptures on this property, and another way to kind of describe folk art is people using readily available materials to just make art. And so these are all made out of concrete, and then it's painted, or the concrete is colored, and it's got objects pressed into it, shells and stones and glass and all kinds of different things. Here's another example of folk art. This one's Dr. Evermore's Foreverton in Baraboo. And this is cool too, because this is using just kind of found objects, all kinds of different pieces of scrap metal and car parts, and just made into these kind of fantastic sculptures. And there's all kinds of examples of folk art in Wisconsin that we can see all around us, you know, two-dimensional like painting, but also the sculptures are really cool. And I put down at the bottom of the lesson plan, Wisconsin Self-Taught Artist Tour, Travel Wisconsin. There's an article there that has a great list of a lot of different places near us and farther away, but all within Wisconsin, of artists just making things just to share that joy and beauty. Okay, so we saw examples of Grandma Moses's painting, which is lots of things happening in the composition, and lots of joy capturing that moment of activity and kind of this fun checkered house that she painted lots over and over again. But to contrast that, she also did work sometimes from Currier and Ives prints. And so here's two examples that we'll have. This one is The Road, Winter, which is kind of a simpler composition, but that, and then also this is the Ingleside Winter, another Currier's and Ives print. And we can see that there's more dimension here. There's shading in the coat here, and then even alongside the house we have the shading, you know, which is just all hatching, because it's a print, that to create that dimension here and depth. And even in the river, there's shading and shadow used that helps gives perspective, more realistic, to just contrast a little bit. So one of the grammar things we're going to work on as a warm-up is, we did this last year for Rembrandt, but it's one of those kind of foundation things for drawing of line and value. So shading, you know, going dark to light and using just our pencil to create that. And then moving into drawing this, starting with simple lines, using oils and shapes, and then adding in that depth through shading and cross-hatching. But so let's see, let's just go over. So we did, so there's great information in the back of the artist card about Grandma Moses, and you can find more information online too about her history. But she didn't start painting until she was in her 70s, and was a grandmother, and just I think that also is just kind of speaking to that just joy of just enjoying the process of painting, of creating things that are beauty that we just have innately. Being created and wanting to create ourselves and share that beauty. So then we have self-taught, compositions are simplified and inspired by Currier and Ives, and she produced hundreds of paintings. She was very prolific. So there's reproductions of her paintings that are on greeting cards and prints and other memorabilia, because she was very prolific. And then some of her famous ones are the Checkered House and Sugaring Off and July 4th. There's lots of paintings online if you want other images to look at. And then our grammar, so folk art, primitive art, self-taught, untrained, that's all talking about the same type of artwork, just that the person didn't necessarily go to school or train as an apprentice under someone else to be able to make the artwork that they are. And she's doing primarily landscape scenes, right? So we have our horizon line and the sky and the ground meet there at the horizon line, but there's still other activity, but it's not focused on just people. Art elements, the composition, balance, so that our eyes move around the composition. There's lots of detail happening obviously here at the Checkered House, and our eyes are drawn to where there are people in that activity, but then there's also details happening, so our eye is drawn all around this artwork. Contour line, so we will get into that also when we do the project draw, but those are contour line again is that defines the shape or the outlines of each object. Line value is the thickness or thinness, and that also helps add dimension. And value is shading, so dark or light, and contrast, also related to that, how different the dark is to the light, and that can be in color or in black and white areas. Okay, and then the warm-up activity, so I'll just show you that here. So the tip here, just like last year, is that we want to use the side of our lead because that gives us a flatter surface for doing shading, so we can be nice and smooth. And you want to press, you can have them do once over, and then you can kind of go back over it to make it as dark as the example one above it until you get that right. And kind of, we're working on pressure control and also and not having to do everything dark or really light. So just trying to get different values in here and have worked them through, and then see how light they can go on the last one. And then cross hatching. So I did cross hatching here. Hatching would just be one direction. Cross hatching is two directions at least. And so we just kind of start laying those lines in. The closer they are, the darker it will seem. So if I make these ones really close, that already looks a lot darker if I spread them out. So you just kind of keep going over it until it's as dark as the one above it, so that we can get that contrast. And then light, we would just do light lines, so very little pressure, but also spread them out too to get that. And you do the ones in between too. But to start there, and then if you have more time or with older kids, you could work on the three-dimensional shapes, making it look like it's got dimension instead of just flat. And then you could work on practicing these ones. So you see how it's darkest in the center area, and then it gets lighter out towards the edges, and then it's not shaded at all at the very edges here and here, or on the top, wherever the light would be coming from. But just starting to think about that. Okay, so that's that. And with the younger kids, you may not spend very much time on that. All right, now I'll just show very quickly what it might look like. So you might just walk through this with kids, choose one of the two Currier and Ives prints to work from, and so we're just looking at something that has lots of details and simplifying it using our oils method. So if I were to look at the horse